The story, The Lost Lion. Once upon a time, in a dense forest, a pair of lions was preparing to welcome their first cub. The lioness was pregnant, while the lion took charge of guarding their territory. Guided by instinct, the male lion marked the boundaries with his scent, a line invisible yet full of power. Any unfamiliar lion crossing this boundary would be fiercely repelled. One day, though heavily pregnant, the lioness had to hunt. Hunger made her steps heavy, but her motherly instinct pushed her on. She targeted a deer grazing leisurely in the valley. The intense chase drained her strength. As the deer leapt over a hillside, the lioness followed, but the jump caused a miscarriage. The cub slipped from her womb and tumbled into a deep ravine. The lioness was devastated. She no longer cared for the prey. Staring into the endless abyss below, she was convinced her cub had died. That pain haunted her for a whole year. A year later, while walking through a nearby forest, the lioness suddenly saw a strange creature, a lion cub, yet behaving, speaking, and moving exactly like a monkey. It climbed trees swiftly, shrieked loudly, ate fruit, and played with a troop of monkeys. The lioness froze. Her instincts told her it was her long-lost cub. She approached with loving eyes, but the cub seemed distant, even evasive. To the cub, Mother was the monkey who had rescued and raised it with care and affection. The large, unfamiliar creature before it was just an intruder. But the lioness didn't give up. Day after day, she quietly visited the forest, observing from afar. She waited until the cub was alone to approach and gently speak to it. Yet every time, she was coldly rejected. Once, she pretended to make a mistake. "Ma'am, I'm sorry. I was foolish the other day. I thought you were my child. But on a closer look, you're clearly a monkey. My apologies." The cub smiled and replied, "That's right. I'm a monkey. You were mistaken, but I forgive you." The lioness asked, "Then may we take a walk together?" This time, the cub agreed. They walked to a crystal-clear stream. As the cub looked into the water, it saw two reflections, a large lion and a small one, identical to itself and the creature beside it. It was startled and uncertain. When the lioness stuck out her tongue, the reflection did too. The cub tried the same, and the image copied it exactly. The lioness let out a powerful roar. The cub, as if awakened, roared too. The sound echoed through the mountains, mighty and majestic, no longer the shrill cry of a monkey. Suddenly, the cub awakened. It was not a monkey. It was a lion. The blood in its veins surged, its instincts rekindled after so long being forgotten. The lioness smiled, leapt across the stream, and walked into the forest. The cub smiled back, sprang forward, and followed. From that day on, mother and child were reunited. The cub lived true to its nature, a dignified king of the jungle. Message: humans are like the lion cub, carrying within the nature of a Buddha, noble and worthy. Yet because of circumstances and forgetfulness, we sometimes see ourselves as lowly and worthless. We need a mirror, a teacher, a situation, to help us see our true nature. Only when we realize who we truly are can we live according to our real value and stride confidently on the path to enlightenment. The story, The Sweet Potato. In a small village deep within the forest, there lived a poor woodcutter with his wife and young child. Their life had always been difficult, and it became even more desperate when the wife suddenly fell gravely ill. The woodcutter tried everything he could to cure her, searching high and low, but they had no money, and medicine was expensive. One day, a traveling physician ventured into the mountains in search of herbs and stopped by the woodcutter's home to ask for water. Upon hearing about the wife's illness, the doctor checked her pulse and wrote a prescription. The woodcutter gathered all the meager coins he had and rushed to buy the medicine. But it wasn't enough. Faced with the fragile boundary between life and death, he decided to risk going to the wealthiest merchant in the village to borrow money. The merchant looked at the ragged, desperate woodcutter and sneered. When the man promised to repay him with firewood, the merchant laughed even louder. "What will you use to repay me? Forget it. Consider it charity." The woodcutter bowed deeply in gratitude and promised to repay the kindness someday. The merchant waved him off, clearly not believing him. With the money, the woodcutter bought the medicine and saved his wife's life. Many years passed, and the once peaceful village was ravaged by famine and disease. Many perished from hunger and illness, and the merchant's family was not spared. He spent his fortune trying to save his wife and children, but was eventually robbed of everything. With nowhere to turn, his family ventured into the forest to forage for food. Deep in the woods, his wife and child collapsed from exhaustion and hunger. The merchant staggered on until he too fell to the ground. When he opened his eyes, he saw someone offering him water and handing him a freshly boiled sweet potato. He devoured it desperately, but halfway through, he suddenly remembered his wife and child lying behind. The man who helped him looked at him and said, "No one can predict what life will bring. Today, I'm repaying you, the one who once helped me when I was in despair." The merchant was stunned. It was the same woodcutter he had mocked years ago. The man he had dismissed as worthless was now the very person saving his life. During the plague, the woodcutter had taken his family into the forest to escape, and they had survived. He had never forgotten the favor, just waited for the day he could repay it. A single sweet potato during famine can save a life. A thoughtless act of charity by a wealthy man had been deeply treasured by the poor woodcutter, who held it close to his heart for years, waiting for a chance to return the kindness. Message: life is impermanent. No one can foresee what the future holds. Today you may be wealthy and powerful, but tomorrow you might lose everything. Never look down on the poor, for when disaster strikes, they may be the very ones who reach out to save you. Gratitude isn't measured by wealth or status, but by sincerity. Even the smallest act of kindness can plant the seed of deep appreciation, a seed that will blossom just when you need it most. Live with kindness. Help others without expecting return, and if you are helped, remember it and repay it. Life is a circle of cause and effect. What you give today may return to you in the most unexpected way. The story. Encountering the Dharma is rare nowadays. With just a few taps on a computer or smartphone, one can find thousands of sutras and hundreds of Dharma talks from renowned teachers. It may seem as if the Dharma is readily within reach, but in truth, it's not that simple. Understanding the Dharma is not merely listening or reading, it's grasping the true meaning. That requires deep penetration, sincere practice, and disciplined cultivation. And that doesn't come from knowledge alone. It demands a solid foundation built over many lifetimes, deep karmic affinity, the guidance of wise teachers and spiritual friends, and a path firmly rooted in morality, sila, concentration, samadhi, and wisdom, praja. On this journey, a practitioner cannot lack the virtue of patience through hardship, obstacles, and even the solitude that often accompanies sincere practice. Those without merit are easily toppled by life's challenges. Those with abundant comfort may fall into complacency. As the Zen masters say, a practitioner should be a little lacking in order to cultivate the mind of contentment and simplicity. If one has ever endured hardship on the path of cultivation, consider comparing that to the suffering of the three lower realms, hell, hungry ghosts, and animals, and the current difficulty will seem trivial. This very truth was illustrated by the Buddha himself in a past life when he lived as a forest ascetic. He once asked the monks, "Suppose someone lives for 100 years. Each day, 3 times a day, that person is pierced with 100 spears. And so it continues for 100 years. At the end, that person has the chance to hear the Dharma and realize insight. Would it be worth it?" The ascetic replied, "For the chance to hear the Dharma and realize insight, I vow to endure it all." Why? Because in the endless cycle of rebirth, sentient beings have suffered in the realms of hell, animals, and hungry ghosts for countless eons without ever encountering the Dharma. But now, if enduring hardship for just one life could lead to the light of liberation, then it is infinitely worthwhile. The Buddha taught that the goal of the Dharma is the direct realization of the Four Noble Truths, to see and know the reality of suffering, its cause, its cessation, and the path. This is the core wisdom, the key that opens the treasure of the Buddha's enlightenment. Message: to encounter the Dharma in this lifetime is an incredibly rare and precious blessing. But to understand it, absorb it, and practice it correctly requires a long, challenging journey. Do not take it lightly just because access is easy. Do not assume that hearing much means understanding much. The Dharma is not found on our lips. It lives in a life of mindfulness and true insight. Practice is not about escaping suffering. It is about facing it directly and transcending it with wisdom and compassion. And if hardship must be endured, remember, across countless lifetimes in samsara, you have already suffered without even a glimpse of light. Now, with diligence in a single lifetime, the light of liberation may be realized here and now. Therefore, to encounter the Dharma is great merit. To understand and apply it is great virtue. And to commit to the path to its end, that is the true courage of a sincere seeker. The story, The Defaced Painting. There was once a painter who carried a grand dream in his heart, to leave behind a timeless masterpiece for future generations. After years of preparation, he finally decided to turn that dream into reality. To escape the distractions of daily life, he chose the breezy rooftop of a tall building as his creative sanctuary. There, he erected a 30-square-meter canvas to begin his magnum opus. For half a year, he painted with the passion of a dreamer, neglecting sleep, irregular meals, and pouring his very soul into each brushstroke. Every stroke was a breath of his spirit, a piece of his flesh and ideals. At last, the masterpiece was born, a vivid, enchanting painting so captivating that passers-by couldn't help but stop and marvel at its beauty. One morning, as usual, he climbed to the rooftop to finish the final touches. A crowd gathered around, mesmerized by the artwork. But in his trance-like admiration, the painter kept stepping backward, unaware that he was nearing the rooftop's edge. One more step, and he would plunge into the abyss below. Among the onlookers, a few noticed the imminent danger, yet none dared shout, fearing that a sudden cry would startle him into falling. Amidst the tense silence, one man lunged forward, grabbed a brush, and defaced the masterpiece with wild strokes, ruining the entire work. The painter was stunned, furious. He screamed, lunged at the man, ready to punish the vandal. But the crowd restrained him and quickly explained that very act of ruining the painting had saved his life. Had it not been for that interruption, he would no longer be alive. An elderly man approached, gently placed a hand on the painter's shoulder, and spoke in a calm, deep voice. In life, we often get so lost in painting the dream of the future that we forget to watch where we are standing. No matter how beautiful or alluring that vision may be, it cannot outweigh the importance of life and mindfulness in the present. If someone unexpectedly disrupts the dream you are creating, do not be too quick to resent them. Perhaps they are saving you from a cliff you haven't yet seen. Message. On the journey of life, many become so engrossed in the pursuit of beautiful dreams for the future that they forget to stay grounded in the present. The allure of what's ahead can blind us to the dangers at our feet. Sometimes, an accident, a disruption, or a person who ruins the dream you're building might actually be the very thing that wakes you up. Learn to be grateful even for the things that seem like destruction in life. For they may not come to cause you pain, but to save you from a mistake you haven't yet realized. Live mindfully, see clearly where you stand, and keep a peaceful heart. That is how you truly paint a life that is both complete and safe. The story. Enlightenment lies in the heart. Long ago, atop a towering mountain stood a serene, ancient monastery. In that monastery lived an old Zen master who had lived in seclusion for many years. It was said that he was a truly enlightened being. One day, a wandering practitioner visited the monastery, seeking to learn the way. After offering his respects, the practitioner asked the old master, "Master, what did you usually do before attaining enlightenment?" The old master smiled gently and replied, "I chopped wood, carried water, cooked meals." The practitioner asked again, "And after attaining enlightenment?" The master calmly answered, "I still chop wood, carry water, cook meals." The practitioner was puzzled and asked, "Then what is enlightenment?" At this, the old master patiently explained, "Before enlightenment, when I chopped wood, I was thinking about carrying water. While carrying water, my mind wandered to cooking meals. While cooking, I was already planning for tomorrow's wood. My mind was never present in the moment. But after enlightenment, when I chop wood, I simply chop wood. When I carry water, I am fully present with each step. When I cook, I focus solely on cooking. My mind dwells exactly where my hands are, on the task at hand." The practitioner stood in awe. He realized that enlightenment was not about changing one's life circumstances, but about a quiet transformation of the mind. Message. The difference between an enlightened practitioner and an ordinary person is not in what they do, but in how they live with what they do. Before enlightenment, the The mind is driven by the past and future, constantly worrying and distracted by things beyond control. After enlightenment, the mind awakens and resides peacefully in the present. Whatever one does it with full attention, without attachment, without distraction. Most of the suffering in life stems from an unsettled mind. We are troubled not because of our circumstances, but because our minds chase after them. When we let go of illusions, attachments, desires, and anxieties, we find lightness and peace within. That is the true path to liberation. To live in harmony with nature, to fully feel each moment, this is wisdom, and it is also the doorway to inner peace, where enlightenment lies not somewhere far, but precisely within the heart. The story. The Tears of the Zen Master. A middle-aged man, after many years of renouncing worldly affairs, became a monk, eventually rising to be a renowned high master known for his virtue and strict discipline. He resided at a remote monastery where many people came to take refuge and study the Dharma. Throughout his years of practice, he often taught his disciples that in order to attain liberation, one must sever worldly ties, abandon romantic attachments, and dissolve the ego. Only when one is no longer bound by the emotional ties of the world can true enlightenment be reached. One day, tragic news came from his homeland. His only son, born before he ordained, had passed away from a severe illness. The disciples were perplexed, unsure whether they should inform the master. Eventually, they reasoned that their teacher, having long cut off worldly attachments and reached a high spiritual state, would not be shaken by such news. So, they decided to tell him. Upon hearing the news of his son's death, the Zen master remained silent for a long time. Then, unexpectedly, 2 quiet streams of tears fell from eyes once believed to be untainted. The disciples were stunned. One of them dared to ask, "Master, you have always taught us to sever worldly attachments and abandon worldly love in pursuit of liberation. So why do you shed tears and sorrow upon hearing of your son's death?" The Zen master gently wiped his tears, looked at his disciple with deep compassion, and softly replied, "I teach you to let go of worldly emotions in pursuit of liberation, but I never taught you to become heartless or selfish. I cry not only for my own son, but for the suffering of all sentient beings. My son was one of them. When a living being suffers, I feel that pain as if it were my own. True love is not bound by ego. It radiates like infinite compassion." The disciples, moved and humbled, suddenly realized, a true spiritual practitioner is not a stone-hearted being, but one who knows how to love with a vast, all-encompassing heart beyond the separation of self and other. Message. Spiritual practice does not mean abandoning emotions, but transforming them into boundless compassion. A truly enlightened person is not one who never cries, but one who knows how to cry for the suffering of all beings. There are tears that are not signs of weakness, but the mark of a heart deep enough to embrace universal love. Before becoming a Buddha, be fully human, complete with emotion, yet not controlled by it. And once a Buddha, it is to love humanity even more. The story. The teapot hanging on a tree. A man was once given an extremely precious purple clay teapot. Treasuring the gift deeply, he carefully placed it on the nightstand beside his bed every night so he could keep a close eye on it. One night, while sleeping, he accidentally rolled over and knocked the teapot off the bed. Its lid flew off and landed somewhere on the floor. Half asleep and disoriented, he saw the teapot lying there but couldn't find the lid. Assuming the lid had shattered, he was overcome with disappointment. Frustrated, he muttered, "The lid's broken. What's the use of keeping the pot?" Without a second thought, he picked up the teapot and threw it out the window, then returned to sleep. The next morning, he happened to see the teapot lid sitting neatly inside one of his cotton slippers by the bed. It was perfectly intact. Furious, he exclaimed, "Oh no, I threw away a priceless teapot for nothing!" In a fit of anger, he smashed the lid to pieces. After breakfast, he went out to the field with his hoe. As he looked up, he was stunned. The purple clay teapot was hanging, perfectly intact, from a tree branch just outside his window. It had caught on a limb when he tossed it the night before. Not only was it unbroken, it was completely unharmed. He stood frozen in silence. The teapot was still there. The lid had been there. But now, only bitter regret remained, all because of his hasty actions. Message. In life, we are often like that man, letting small things upset us and acting impulsively without thinking. In a moment of anger, a tiny mistake like a missing teapot lid can cause us to throw away something far more valuable. Only after the anger fades do we realize things weren't as bad as they seemed. But by then, it may be too late. The more tense the situation, the more we need calm. Calmness isn't just a trait of maturity, it's the key to wisdom and clarity. One moment of patience in anger can prevent 100 days of sorrow. So don't rush to conclusions. Don't be quick to discard what matters. Sometimes what you think you've lost is simply hanging on a tree, waiting for you to see it with clearer eyes. The story. The bodhisattva only sits to see once. While strolling through a garden, a man happened to see a butterfly cocoon hanging delicately from a branch. He paused to watch and noticed a small hole slowly opening in the cocoon's shell. Curious, he sat down and intently observed the butterfly struggling to squeeze through that tiny opening. Hours passed. The butterfly writhed and flailed in vain, desperately trying to push itself out of the cocoon. Eventually, it seemed exhausted. It stopped moving. No more progress. The man felt sympathy, thinking the butterfly needed help. He took a pair of scissors and gently cut the cocoon, widening the exit. Indeed, the butterfly emerged easily, but its body was swollen and its wings were tiny, shriveled, and weak. They couldn't spread out. The butterfly never flew. For the rest of its life, it could only crawl clumsily on the ground. The man didn't realize that tight cocoon and the butterfly's painful struggle were nature's way of helping it develop. Through that very struggle, fluid from its body is pushed into its wings, allowing them to strengthen and expand enough for flight. Without that effort, the wings remain frail, and the butterfly is forever grounded. Similarly, some people think, the bodhisattva will come save me, like a mother doing all the homework for her child, solving every problem for them. But in truth, a true bodhisattva does not intervene directly. The bodhisattva simply sits and sees, witnessing beings in their suffering, watching how they wrestle with life, and slowly come to understand themselves. The bodhisattva does not act on their behalf, does not cut the cocoon, does not break the law of cause and effect. They simply offer insight, pointing the way, so that each person may walk their own path. Message: don't expect someone to overcome life's challenges for you. The hardships and pain you endure are the very lessons that help you grow. They are the process by which you grow wings to fly. A bodhisattva is not a rescuer, but a guide. Learn to free yourself from the cocoon of ignorance, laziness, and dependency. Only then will you truly have strong wings to soar. The story. Who stole the prayer beads? At a sacred ancient temple perched atop a high mountain, there was an invaluable relic. The prayer beads, once worn by the Buddha himself, solemnly enshrined in the main hall. Due to their spiritual aura and profound significance, the temple became renowned far and wide, with incense burning day and night. The abbot was a virtuous high monk. Under his guidance were 7 disciples, each possessing intelligence and strong moral conduct. The master had high hopes that one of them would inherit his legacy and continue to glorify the Dharma. One day, the prayer beads suddenly vanished. The entire temple was shaken. The abbot solemnly summoned the 7 disciples. Who took the prayer beads? If you return them now, I will not pursue the matter. The Buddha is compassionate and will not condemn. All 7 shook their heads. No one admitted to the act. 7 days passed, and the prayer beads remained missing. The abbot spoke again. If the one who took them steps forward, I will give the beads to that person. There will be no punishment, only the wish that they take responsibility. But once again, silence. No confessions. Only suspicion slowly crept between the brothers. A week later, the abbot sorrowfully declared, "Starting tomorrow, all of you shall leave the temple. Only the one who took the beads should stay." The next morning, 6 disciples packed their belongings and silently descended the mountain. Only one remained, bowing in front of the main hall. The master asked, "Where are the prayer beads?" "Master, I did not take them." "Then why did you stay?" "Because if I left, the 6 brothers would continue to doubt one another, suffering from broken trust. Someone had to stay to end it all. If bearing this false blame brings peace to everyone, I accept it. Even if misunderstood, I have no regrets." The abbot was silent for a long time. Then, from his sleeve, he produced the prayer beads and gently placed them on the disciple's wrist, eyes filled with kindness. The one who can sacrifice reputation, bear injustice for the greater good and harmony among brothers, this is the one truly worthy to inherit the Dharma. The prayer beads were never lost. I only wish to test hearts and intentions. Message: not everything in life needs to be clarified or debated. Sometimes, understanding and compassion shine brighter on the path of virtue. True strength lies in the ability to endure, to resolve, and to remain silent for the sake of something greater. The Dharma isn't just in words, it is in actions, in a heart that considers others, rising above ego. Those who understand you need no explanation. Those who don't, no amount of words will suffice. Realizing this is true wisdom. The story: is revenge really necessary? Long ago, in a large city, there lived an old beggar, thin, frail, and dressed in tattered rags. Each day, he wandered the crowded streets, hoping for a scrap of food or a worn piece of clothing, just enough to survive. One day, he stood at the gate of a grand mansion belonging to the wealthiest man in the city and humbly begged for a small coin or a morsel of food, the only thing he hoped for. But the wealthy man not only ignored him, he grew angry at being disturbed. Instead of charity, he picked up a stone and hurled it at the beggar, hitting him hard. The beggar remained silent, picked up the stone, stared at it intently, and slipped it into his pocket. He whispered to himself, "I'll keep this stone. The day that man falls from power, I'll repay him with this very rock." From then on, the stone became inseparable from him. Wherever he went, he carried it, a symbol of the burning grudge he held. Though he lived in poverty, one desire consumed him: revenge. Years passed. Times changed. The once rich man, exposed for dishonest dealings, lost everything. He was convicted and thrown into prison, broken and destitute, stripped of all former glory. One day, as he was being led through the streets in chains, the beggar happened to witness the scene. Recognizing the face from long ago, he quickly pulled the old stone from his pocket. His hands trembled. His heart pounded. He followed the procession, eyes locked onto the man who once humiliated him. But when he came close enough to see the weary, hollow eyes and the gaunt face of the fallen man, something shifted inside him. Amid the murmurs of the crowd, the beggar slowly let the stone fall to the ground. His gaze was calm. Quiet. He told himself, "I've carried this stone all these years. Was it heavy because of the rock or because of the hatred in my heart? Now, that man is no different from me, a soul in suffering. Why hold on to this resentment any longer? If I can pick something up, then surely I can put it down. Not for him, but for my own peace." Message: carrying hatred is like bearing a heavy stone on your back. Every step becomes a burden. Forgiveness isn't about whether the other person deserves it. It's about whether you deserve peace. Only by letting go do we become truly free. Happiness doesn't come from revenge. It comes from the strength to forgive and move forward with a lighter heart. The story: the blind man who carried a lantern. One dim moonlit night, with the wind still and quiet, a Zen master was strolling leisurely along a winding path through the village when he spotted a shadowy figure ahead. Curiously, it was a blind man slowly feeling his way forward, holding a lantern that cast a warm golden light in the dark. The sight puzzled the Zen master. He thought to himself, a blind man can't see light, so why would he need a lantern? As he walked closer, he heard some passers-by sneering and joking. A blind man carrying a lantern! What a ridiculous sight! Moved with compassion, the Zen master gently asked the blind man, "My friend, you cannot see, so why carry a lantern? What use is it to you?" The blind man stopped, turned toward the sound of the master's voice, and smiled. "I've been told that when night falls, even those with good eyesight can't see the road clearly. So I carry this lantern not for myself, but to light the way for others, so they can see the path and not stumble." The Zen master was deeply touched and replied, "So you do this out of kindness, to help others. Truly, compassion knows no darkness or light." The blind man smiled gently. "That's true, but it's not the whole truth. I also do this for myself. When there's light, others can see me and avoid bumping into me. Helping others is also a way of helping myself." Those simple words rang like a bell in the stillness of the night, awakening the Zen master. He stood silently for a moment, then bowed deeply to the blind man, as if bowing before an enlightened being. Message. In life, what we do for others is often the very thing that protects and uplifts ourselves. Helping others is helping ourselves, for no act of kindness ever goes to waste. Like the blind man's lantern, though he could not see it, it still lit the way for others and kept him safe. So light a lantern, with compassion, with understanding, even in the darkest of nights. That light will illuminate the world and also your own soul. The story, The Zen Master and the Enraged Young Man. As twilight draped its violet hue over the mountain peaks, a cold wind rustled through the leaves, deepening the quiet. Suddenly, a furious scream echoed from afar. A young man, face twisted in anguish, eyes burning red, stormed through the forest. His heavy footsteps crushed the dry leaves beneath him like the cracking of a shattered heart. The cry reached the ears of an old Zen master who had been meditating nearby. He opened his eyes, stood up slowly, and approached the young man, not with alarm, but with a serene smile. "You're in deep pain, aren't you?" The young man, surprised, paused, and then, as if a dam had broken, poured out his suffering. 8 years of dedication to his company, only to be dismissed with a single order. A girlfriend he had loved and cared for had left him when hardship struck. Betrayal, injustice. His heart was on fire. The Zen master sat quietly beside him, his expression as calm as a still lake. When the young man had released all his anger, the master gently placed a hand on his shoulder and guided him up the mountain. The wind atop the peak was cool and refreshing, brushing away the storm in the young man's soul. The master reached out to catch a willow flower drifting on the breeze. It slipped softly through his fingers, carried by the wind. Smiling, the master said, "I'm old now. I can no longer catch the willow flowers." In life, there are things of great beauty, but not all of them can be held. If we cannot keep them, perhaps it's better to see them off on their journey. Let them move on beautifully, and let our hearts remain at peace. The young man stood speechless. The master's words flowed through him like wind through his chest, gentle yet profound. He bowed deeply, then descended the mountain in silence. From that day forward, he lived differently. No more bitterness. No more clinging to what no longer belonged. He patiently trained the person who replaced him at work. On his final day, his employer, moved to tears, personally saw him off, full of admiration and regret. He even brought healing balm to his former lover, not out of resentment, but of care. She wept, but he only smiled and walked away, light as a drifting willow flower. Time passed. He became a person loved and respected by many. His compassion and inner peace opened doors to new opportunities. One day, he returned to the mountain temple, hoping to thank the man who had changed his life. But the Zen master had passed away. A student of the master told him that even in illness, the master remained cheerful and devoted his final strength to teaching others how to live peacefully. He stood in silence before the altar, bowed and smiled warmly. He understood the Zen master had not only released willow blossoms, but had gracefully released himself with the same serenity and dignity. Message. In life, there are things we simply cannot hold on to. The more we cling, the more we suffer. Sometimes, the greatest act of strength is to let go, gently, gratefully, and at peace. For in that letting go, we begin the journey toward true serenity. The story. Is it heavy? One early morning, before sunlight had pierced through the dense canopy of trees, Master Anchat and his disciples strolled along a winding path in a quiet countryside village. The chirping of birds mingled with the soft rustle of leaves in the breeze, soothing the soul. As they neared a bend in the road, Master Anchat suddenly stopped, pointed to a large stone resting silently by the roadside, and asked, "Do you think that stone is heavy?" The disciples looked at it. It was big, rugged, and weathered by time. In unison, they replied, "Yes, Master, it's very heavy." Master Anchat smiled gently, his gaze stretching into the distance. "It's not heavy, not if you don't try to carry it." The disciples were momentarily stunned, a statement as light as air, yet it struck them like a bell echoing through the mind. He continued, "In life, there are countless burdens, worries, fears, regrets, and we often label them as weights we must carry. But you see, they are only heavy when we try to hold them. If we simply acknowledge their presence without clinging, resisting, or trying to change them, they're just stones by the roadside." He paused, then spoke slowly and deeply. Who in life hasn't faced hardship? But what makes us suffer is not the hardship itself, but our reaction to it. We keep trying to change, escape, or eliminate discomfort without realizing that it's the struggle that weighs us down. Sometimes all we need to do is stand still, see things clearly, and let go of the need to change them. In that moment, the mind becomes bright like the full moon, and peace naturally arises. Message: the weight of life does not come from circumstances, but from the way we relate to them. Some pain is inevitable, but we don't need to make it heavier by clinging, resisting, or blaming. Not everything needs to be changed. Sometimes changing our perspective is enough. And then, amid all the chaos, we may discover a place of serenity, right where we stand. The story: few people laugh at the same story twice. In a quiet little village, there lived a wise man known far and wide for his deep wisdom and compassion. Villagers would often come to him seeking advice for their troubles. Every day, his house was bustling with visitors, some complaining about work, others burdened by family woes, still others lamenting their fate. Strangely, many brought up the same problems over and over, day after day. One day, the wise man gathered everyone in his courtyard and said, "Today, I will tell you a story." He shared a simple but witty tale. When he finished, the entire crowd burst into laughter. The courtyard echoed with joy. A moment later, he told the exact same story again, word for word, line by line. This time, only a few people smiled. A little while later, he repeated the story a third time, but now no one laughed. Some looked puzzled, others even seemed irritated. At that moment, the wise man smiled and said, "You can only laugh at the same joke once, maybe twice. By the third time, it no longer brings you joy. So why, then, do you let a single sorrow or complaint repeat endlessly in your mind, day after day?" The crowd fell silent. In that moment, everyone seemed to awaken to a truth they had long overlooked. Message: we don't laugh at the same joke again and again, so why do we hold on to the same sadness, replaying it endlessly? Repeating a complaint won't solve the problem. It only deepens your exhaustion and suffering. Learn to let go. Learn to reflect and transform. That is the true path to peace and healing in life. The story: evil remains with the doer. Goodness returns to the doer. Long ago, there was a kind-hearted woman who baked bread for her family every day. She always made one extra loaf to give to the poor. Each morning, she placed the extra loaf on her windowsill, where any passerby could take it. Every day, a hunchbacked man would walk by, quietly take the bread, and mutter, "Evil remains with the doer. Goodness returns to the doer." The woman, having heard him repeat this over and over, began to feel irritated. She thought, "I bake bread every day to help this man, and he never says thank you. He just keeps mumbling that strange phrase, as if casting a curse on me." Eventually, one morning, overwhelmed by frustration, she had a wicked idea. "I'll teach him a lesson." She put poison into the loaf and was about to place it on the windowsill like usual. But as she held the loaf in her hands, her fingers began to tremble. In that brief moment, she snapped out of her anger, terrified at what she had almost done. She threw the poisoned bread into the fire and hurried to bake a new, wholesome loaf, just as she had done every day. The hunchbacked man came by again, quietly took the bread, and once more muttered, "Evil remains with the doer. Goodness returns to the doer." What no one knew was that each day, as she placed the bread on the windowsill, the woman whispered a prayer for her son, who had been away for months, jobless and without news. "Please let my son be safe. Let him come back to me." That very evening, there was a knock at the door. When she opened it, she was stunned to see her son standing there, gaunt, his clothes torn, face worn thin, but eyes full of light. He said, "Mother, it's a miracle I made it home. On my way back, just a mile from here, I collapsed from hunger and exhaustion. I thought I was going to die. But a hunchbacked man passed by, saw me struggling, and gave me a loaf of delicious bread. He said, 'This is what I receive every day, but today I think you need it more than I do.'" The mother was speechless. Her eyes widened, her body trembled, and she had to hold on to the doorframe to stay upright. In her heart, the familiar words echoed again. "Evil remains with the doer. Goodness returns to the doer." Had she not thrown the poisoned bread into the fire that morning, it might have been her own beloved son who would not have survived the day. Message: the law of cause and effect never fails. Every action, no matter how small, carries its own consequence. Goodness will return to us in mysterious and miraculous ways, while evil, sooner or later, will fall upon the one who created it. Let us live with kindness and compassion, for only virtuous deeds can lead us to true peace and happiness. The story, choosing the right path matters more than how you walk. Long ago, there was a young man known for his diligence. He worked harder than anyone else, always persistent and tireless. Yet after years of relentless effort, his life remained stagnant. His career showed no progress. Weary and disheartened, he sought out a renowned Zen master for guidance. "Master, I've always done my best, never slacked off, yet my life hasn't improved at all. Why is that?" The Zen master listened calmly, but didn't answer right away. Instead, he summoned 3 of his disciples who were chopping firewood in the mountains. When they arrived, the master said, "All of you, along with this layman, go to the mountain 5 miles from here and gather firewood. Each of you should collect as much as you think is enough, then bring it back." The 4 of them set out. Following the riverside trail, they climbed the mountain and began chopping wood. By late afternoon, they returned. The young man arrived first, drenched in sweat and limping, carrying 2 heavy bundles of firewood. Behind him came 2 of the master's disciples, one carrying 4 bundles with the help of the other, while the third arrived empty-handed but looking relaxed. Then, a raft floated down the river, and the youngest, slimmest disciple of the master appeared, carrying 8 bundles of firewood, still calm and unburdened. The young man and the 2 other disciples stood dumbfounded. The master and his youngest disciple simply exchanged a knowing smile. The master asked, "How do you all feel? Is anyone dissatisfied with their load?" The young man bowed his head and replied, "Master, I chopped 6 bundles of wood, but halfway back I was exhausted and had to abandon 2. Later I had to drop 2 more because I was too tired. Now I only have these 2 left, but I truly tried my best." The eldest disciple said, "My younger brother and I knew our limits, so we each chopped 2 bundles, tied 4 together on a pole, and took turns carrying. That way, we didn't get tired." The youngest smiled and added, "I'm small and weak. Carrying even 1 bundle by foot would have been difficult. So I chose to float them down the river using a raft." The master nodded, gently patted the young man's shoulder, and said, "Hard work is good, but not always enough. Choosing your path isn't necessarily wrong, but what matters most is whether that path is right. If you walk diligently but in the wrong direction, the farther you go, the further you are from your goal. Remember this. In life, sometimes the path you choose is more important than how hard you try." Message: diligence is admirable, but without the wisdom to choose the right direction, effort can go to waste. Life is not just a story of hard work, it's a journey of clarity and discernment. True success lies not in moving fast, but in moving wisely. A smart traveler is not the one who walks the fastest, but the one who walks the right path. The story, when alone, do you eat meat? One day, a visitor came to the temple, burdened with lingering questions. After paying respects to the Buddha, he cautiously approached an elderly monk sitting quietly in the temple courtyard. Bowing respectfully, he said, "Venerable Master, I have a question. It may seem a little disrespectful, but I humbly ask for your permission to speak." The monk looked at the visitor with gentle eyes and smiled. "Go ahead, ask whatever you like." The man bowed his head and hesitantly asked, "I've often seen you strictly observe vegetarian practice in public. But may I ask honestly, when you're alone in your private room where no one sees, do you secretly eat meat?" The monk did not answer right away. He looked at the man for a moment, then calmly asked, "Did you drive here?" Surprised, the man nodded. "Yes," the monk continued. "When you drive, do you wear a seatbelt?" "Of course I do." "Then tell me this, do you wear a seatbelt for your own safety, or just to avoid getting fined by traffic police?" The man paused, thoughtful, then answered, "Well, for my own safety." The monk smiled kindly. "Exactly. If you do it for yourself, then whether or not police are present doesn't matter, does it?" The same applies to keeping precepts, eating vegetarian, and following the path of virtue. If we do it only because others are watching, then when no one sees, we'll easily abandon it. But if we do it out of conscience, out of devotion to our spiritual path, then even in solitude, our heart remains pure and our actions unwavering. At that moment, the visitor felt as if a light had dawned in his mind. His face flushed and he bowed deeply. I understand now. Thank you for your teaching. Message. Observing precepts, cultivating virtue, and doing good are not for display, but for nurturing the soul and protecting oneself. Just like wearing a seatbelt isn't to impress others, but to safeguard your life. When we understand that spiritual discipline is for our own well-being, we remain steadfast and pure, whether in a crowd or alone. Being honest with oneself is the strongest foundation for true morality and virtue. The story. The 4 things even the Buddha cannot alter. One early morning, as the first light of day gently touched the mountains and forests, the Buddha Shakyamuni led his disciples through a quiet rural village. A soft breeze stirred the trees, birds sang cheerfully, and flowers released their sweet fragrances. The whole world seemed to rejoice in life. By the riverbank, the Buddha and his disciples paused, laid out their mats, and sat in silence, taking in the serene landscape. Amid this stillness, a young disciple respectfully bowed and asked, "World-honored one, you possess infinite compassion, wisdom, and miraculous powers. Yet why do so many beings still suffer endlessly in samsara?" The Buddha slowly opened his eyes, his gaze full of warmth and clarity, and replied gently, "No matter how vast the Tathagata's powers may be, there are 4 things even I cannot alter." The disciples, astonished, bowed deeply. "World-honored one, please enlighten us. What are these 4 unchangeable truths?" The Buddha paused, then spoke in a calm and resonant voice that blended with the stillness of nature. First is karma, cause and effect. It cannot be changed. Whatever one sows, that shall one reap. No one can bear another's karma, and not even divine power can erase what has already been planted. Second is wisdom. It cannot be given. To gain wisdom, each person must make their own effort through study and cultivation. The Tathagata can point the way, but cannot walk it for anyone. Third is the Dharma. It cannot be fully conveyed through words. The Dharma must be felt with the heart, realized with insight. Even if explained in 1,000 words, without mindfulness and deep affinity, it is just empty sound. Fourth is affinity, spiritual connection. Without it, one cannot be guided. Those without the karmic affinity for the path, even if they stand before the Buddha and hear the Dharma, will not awaken. Upon hearing this, the disciples bowed in reverence, their minds illuminated. They realized that there are things in life that cannot be forced. All things in this world revolve around the principle of conditioned arising. When the right conditions converge, there is meeting. When conditions end, there is parting. Not even miraculous powers can create affinity, nor can intellect reverse karma. Like rain falling everywhere, yet a rootless tree cannot absorb the water. The Dharma is vast and boundless, but without affinity, it cannot penetrate the heart. Human life is but a fleeting dream amid impermanence, filled with meetings, love, pain, all driven by the workings of karma and causes. Message. On the path of practice and in life itself, some truths lie beyond human control, even beyond the Buddhas. These are the law of karma, wisdom that must be self-earned, the Dharma that must be personally realized, and the nature of affinity that cannot be forced. Understanding this, we learn to live more lightly, not blaming life, not clinging to control, but instead nurturing good causes, cultivating our hearts, and welcoming every moment of connection as a complete expression of this precious life. The story, a lesson on the value of life. At a peaceful temple nestled at the foot of a mountain, a young novice lived with his master. One day, while sweeping the temple courtyard, the boy looked up and asked, "Master, what is the true value of a person's life?" The master smiled, but didn't answer right away. Instead, he went into his room and returned with an old, dusty, and unattractive stone. He handed it to the novice and said, "Take this stone to the market and try to sell it. But remember, no matter how much someone offers, do not sell it. Just listen to their offer and come back to tell me." Though confused, the boy obeyed out of eagerness to learn. He brought the stone to the market. All day long, in the midst of the bustling crowd, no one paid any attention to it. Only near the end of the day did a street vendor stop and ask with pity, "How much for this stone?" "I'll give you 500 dong." Remembering his master's instruction, the boy returned to the temple and reported the offer. The master nodded and said, "Tomorrow, take the same stone to the biggest gold shop in town. Again, do not sell, just ask for the price." The next morning, puzzled but obedient, the boy took the stone to the gold shop. The store owner, upon seeing the stone, widened his eyes and examined it closely. After a while, he said, "Little one, I'll give you 5 million for this stone." Shocked but following orders, the boy declined and went back to his master, now with disbelief on his face. The master smiled again. "Tomorrow, bring the stone to the finest antique store in the region. Again, no matter what they offer, do not sell." On the third day, the boy brought the stone to the largest antique shop. After a long and intense examination, the owner exclaimed in awe, "This is a rare ancient artifact. I'm willing to trade my entire fortune for it." Stunned, the boy quietly brought the stone back to the temple. As soon as he arrived, he ran to his master and asked urgently, "Master, what is this stone really? How could it go from worthless to priceless?" The master gently replied, "My child, this is your lesson on the value of life. The stone never changed, but its value differed depending on where it was placed. At the market, it was worth only a few hundred dong. In the gold shop, it was worth millions. And at the antique store, it became priceless. Life is just the same. Your value is not defined by others. It is defined by where you choose to be, the environment you place yourself in, and how you live. If you remain where no one understands you, you may feel worthless. But if you dare to be in the right place and live true to your nature and potential, your worth will be recognized and cherished." Message: the value of life isn't determined by who we are in others' eyes, but by how much we believe in ourselves and where we choose to grow. A rough stone in the market is just a rock, but in the hands of someone who understands its value, it becomes a treasure. So it is with people. Live with integrity and place yourself among those who can see your worth. That is the true value of life. The story: the importance of knowing yourself. High atop a mountain, in a quiet monastery, there lived a donkey. Each day, its task was to walk in circles in the courtyard, grinding rice. The repetitive labor gradually wore it down. Bored and weary, it began to dream. "If only I could go out into the world, see new places, and be free from this millstone, how happy I would be." One day, the chance arrived. A monk from the temple needed to descend the mountain to transport goods and chose the donkey as his companion. The donkey rejoiced, filled with excitement. At the foot of the mountain, the monk placed a large statue of the Buddha on the donkey's back and returned to the monastery. Along the way, passers-by saw the Buddha statue, and at once they stopped, bowed, and paid their respects. The donkey was stunned, at first confused and frightened by the behavior. But gradually, it grew proud and thought, "So I am truly noble. Everyone reveres me." From then on, it changed. Each time it saw someone coming, it would deliberately block the path, raise its head high, expecting to be worshipped. Upon returning to the monastery, it refused to pull the millstone, claiming its status had changed. The monk, unable to reason with it, let it go. Wandering down the mountain, one day the donkey came upon a wedding procession, drums and cymbals resounding joyfully. Mistakenly thinking the crowd had come to welcome it again, it boldly stepped into the center of the road. But this time, the people were furious. They shouted, waved sticks, and chased it away. Beaten and terrified, the donkey limped back to the monastery, battered and broken. Before dying, it cried out to the monk, "Master, why are people so cruel? The first time I came down the mountain, everyone bowed to me, but now they beat me without mercy." The monk simply sighed and shook his head. "Foolish creature. They weren't bowing to you. They were bowing to the Buddha statue on your back." Message: the Buddha once said, "The mind is the greatest deceiver. Others may fool you for a moment, but your own mind can deceive you your entire life." The greatest tragedy is living a lifetime without ever realizing who you truly are. We often mistake respect for ourselves when it's actually directed at our status, wealth, appearance. But when those things fade, so does the admiration. True value isn't found in external things, it lies within. If we live only for the praise of others, without understanding ourselves, we're bound to fall into delusion and disappointment. Self-awareness is the foundation of clarity and peace. A person with a solid inner life, no matter their outer form, will still be respected, for true beauty is the beauty of the soul. As the Dalai Lama once said, beauty is not about making people come near, but about making them want to stay. The story: A lesson on happiness. At a small school during a special class session, the teacher brought a small gift for each student, a balloon. Each child was asked to write their name on their balloon with a marker, and then all the balloons were taken to the hallway and mixed together. The teacher said, "You have 5 minutes to find the balloon with your name on it. Go." Immediately, the hallway erupted in chaos. The children rushed, flipping through balloons, eyes darting, hands fumbling quickly. Yet as time passed, not a single student could find their own balloon. When the 5 minutes were up, not one child held up a balloon. The whole class looked at one another and sighed in disappointment. Then the teacher smiled and said, "Now let's try something different. Pick up any balloon you see, read the name on it, and give it to the person whose name is written there." The children followed the instruction, and in less than 5 minutes, every balloon had been returned to its rightful owner. Gone were the scenes of scrambling and dismay. In their place were smiles, grateful nods, and a hallway filled with joy and excitement. The teacher looked at his students and gently said, "You see, these balloons are like happiness. If everyone only tries to find happiness for themselves, it's hard to achieve. But if we care about each other's happiness, we'll all find it." On the path of bringing joy to others, you'll discover joy for yourself too. Message: happiness isn't about clinging tightly to something for ourselves, but about sharing, caring, and giving. When we live for others, we don't lose anything. Instead, we open our hearts to receive even more. Happiness is a miracle. The more you give, the more you receive. The story, The Ugly Girl. One afternoon, a Zen master was walking along a riverside when he suddenly saw a young girl throw herself into the rushing current. Without hesitation, he cried out for help. Luckily, some nearby villagers heard his call and quickly jumped in to rescue the girl. When she regained consciousness, instead of expressing gratitude, the girl turned to the master with resentment. "Why did you save me? Why didn't you just let me die?" The Zen master calmly asked, "Why did you want to end your life?" With tears in her eyes, the girl choked. "Because I'm too ugly. Everyone mocks me, scorns me, looks down on me. No one likes me. I see no joy, no meaning in life. I'd rather be dead." The master looked at her gently, then pointed toward the people gathering along the riverbank. There are two kinds of lives a person can live. One is a selfish life, focused only on oneself, constantly measuring gain and loss, easily wounded by the opinions of others. That life, you just tried to end in the river. He paused, then continued, "But there is another life, a life lived for others. A life of compassion, thinking of others, helping, bringing joy to those around you. That life I have saved for you today. So from now on, live that second life, not to please yourself, but to ease the suffering of others." The girl was silent. His words swept through her with the freshness of a breeze across her parched soul. She said nothing, only nodded as silent tears fell. From that day on, she changed completely. She began doing small acts of kindness, helping the poor, caring for the elderly, comforting those in pain. She no longer cared about her appearance or others' gossip. Gradually, the whole village came to know her. They gave her a new name, Han Tien, doing good. That name spread across the town, and everyone admired and loved her for her gentle heart and kindness. Strangely, over time, her face seemed to change as well. Her smile was always present, her eyes bright and kind. Whoever saw her felt warmth and closeness. She lived a joyful, meaningful life full of happiness. Message: life itself doesn't change. It is our perspective that brings transformation. Before, the girl lived with a selfish view, fixated on the unfairness she faced, and so saw only suffering. But when she opened her heart and lived for others, her mind became clear and life became bright. In Buddhism, this is called transform the mind, and the world transforms. When our hearts are compassionate and expansive, no longer entangled in personal sorrow, the world around us becomes lighter and more peaceful. And that is the most beautiful, most noble way to live a human life. The story, Profit and Loss. One day, a disciple approached his master with a puzzled expression and asked, "Master, should someone on the spiritual path be concerned with profit and loss?" The monk smiled gently. "Yes, of course, but not in terms of material gain like worldly people. Practitioners must also calculate profit and loss, but in terms of peace versus affliction. If you have more peace than suffering, that is a profit. If you have more suffering than peace, that is a loss. The disciple nodded, but still seemed unsure. He continued, Master, could you give me a clear example so I can better understand? The monk replied, Imagine before coming here, you forgot a bag worth about 100,000 dong. You realize it and consider going back to get it, but the round trip would cost you 200,000 dong in transport. Would you go? The disciple laughed and shook his head. No, losing 100,000 but spending 200,000 to get it back is clearly a loss. I wouldn't go. The monk nodded. Life is the same. On your way here, suppose someone insulted you and made you angry. If you carry that anger with you when you meet me, still irritated, still thinking about it, then that's a loss. What's gone is already gone, yet you continue to waste mental energy on it. That is a double loss. But if you let it go, don't carry those negative feelings with you, and come to me in peace and joy, that's a profit. You've saved yourself an entire trip of mental affliction. The monk gently concluded, In life, if you keep holding on to past troubles and tormenting yourself, that's a big loss. Letting go is a big gain. That is how a practitioner calculates profit and loss. Message: words, actions, or external circumstances don't hurt us as much as how we carry them in our hearts. Every time we revisit a painful memory without letting it go, we suffer another loss. Those who know how to live peacefully are those who know how to release, choosing present joy over clinging to past anger. Spiritual practice is not about avoiding difficulties, but about not carrying them with us. Letting go of even one thing is a gain for a lifetime. The story: what kind of freedom do you prefer? One beautiful morning, a revered Thai master was invited to a lay disciple's home for breakfast. In the living room where they sat, there was a stunning aquarium filled with vibrant fish swimming gracefully in crystal clear water. A young monk nearby looked at the fish tank and shook his head with sadness. Master, keeping fish in a glass tank seems to go against the compassionate spirit of Buddhism. Fish should be free to swim in rivers, lakes, and ponds. Why are they imprisoned in this glass box? The master smiled gently and calmly replied, You're right, the fish in the tank cannot swim wherever they please. But think a little deeper. Is freedom in the wild truly freedom? He slowly explained. First, fish in the tank don't have to fear fishing hooks. In the wild, even a plump worm can be a deadly trap. Every meal becomes a gamble with death, making them live in constant fear and anxiety. Second, fish in the tank aren't threatened by larger fish that prey on them. In nature, small fish live in perpetual fear of being hunted, unable to swim freely. Even the darkness itself can be a lurking danger. Third, tank fish are well fed. 2 balanced meals a day, on schedule. Wild fish can starve for days or die from hunger when conditions change. Fourth, wild fish endure harsh climates, hot, shallow waters in summer, freezing hot, icy depths in winter. But tank fish enjoy temperature-regulated water, warm in winter, cool in summer. Fifth, wild fish have no one to treat them when they're sick. But tank fish have health insurance. Their owner calls a vet to care for them at the first sign of illness. The master concluded, It's true, tank fish lack the freedom to roam, but they are freed from many dangers and fears. Freedom in the jungle may be freedom, to be eaten, while freedom within a framework can be true peace. Looking at the young monk, he spoke gently. Humans are the same. Living by ethics and precepts may seem like restriction to some, but in truth, it frees us from greed, from consequences, from suffering born of our own desires. It is inner freedom, no longer dragged by pain, that is true freedom. Then he asked, So, which kind of freedom do you prefer? Message: not all forms of freedom lead to happiness. Some freedoms are simply masks for indulgence and danger, and some boundaries, like ethical discipline, bring profound liberation. True freedom is not doing whatever we want, but not being controlled by our wants. When we live with moral integrity, we're no longer ruled by desire or bound by fear. That is an unshakable freedom. The story: redemption that led to the heavens. More than 2,500 years ago, across the land of India, the wondrous sound of the Buddha's teachings echoed far and wide. Regardless of hardship, the Buddha traveled everywhere, from grand palaces to humble alleyways, spreading the light of the Dharma to liberate beings drowning in the sea of suffering. One day, The Buddha stopped at Vulture Peak in the kingdom of Magadha to give a sermon to thousands of disciples. King Bimbisara, the ruler of Magadha, ascended the mountain with his ministers to pay homage and humbly requested, "World-honored one, in the bamboo forest near Rajagaha, there is a fierce venomous snake that has harmed many. Out of compassion, please subdue it with your great power to save the people from calamity." The Buddha agreed. The next day, he entered the bamboo forest alone. From afar, the venomous snake saw him and, in a fiery rage, opened its mouth wide and hissed, ready to strike. But at that moment, from the Buddha's fingertips, 5 radiant beams of light, each a different color, shone directly onto the snake's body. Bathed in this mystical light, the snake felt its body grow light and cool. Its anger dissolved. Compassion arose. It lifted its head and gazed at the Buddha with reverence, thinking, "Who is this being who can bring such peace to my body and mind?" Knowing the snake had been subdued, the Buddha revealed, "Nobleman Hyundian, in past lives you were a wealthy man, but stingy, greedy, and jealous. You never gave, never shared. When beggars came, not only did you refuse them, but you scolded and drove them away with cruel eyes and a harsh heart. Because of these karmic seeds, you have been reborn as a dangerous and unsightly snake. Yet even now you remain unrepentant and continue harming others. If you do not sincerely repent, you will continue to sink into suffering without end." The Buddha's compassionate words were like a sharp sword cutting through the veil of ignorance. The snake bowed its head, a deep sense of shame rising within it, and sincerely repented. "World-honored one, I now understand my sins. From this day forward, I vow to follow your teachings, abandon evil deeds, and cultivate goodness." The Buddha replied, "If you truly seek liberation, enter my alms bowl." The snake obediently crawled into the Buddha's bowl. The Buddha carried the bowl out of the forest. When the king and his ministers heard the news, they rushed into the forest to witness it. Seeing the crowd, the snake felt deep shame for its form and voluntarily let go of its life. Due to its sincere repentance and virtuous intent, it was reborn in the heaven of the 33, Trayastrimsha, enjoying celestial blessings. Later, at the Bamboo Grove Monastery, a marvelous voice rang out from the sky. "Great and holy Lord, perfect in blessings and wisdom. In my ignorance, I was once lost. But through your guidance, my eyes were opened. You cleansed my defilements, carried me across the sea of birth and death. Through your compassion, my snake form has been transformed, and I now dwell in the heavenly realm." Message: sin is not as frightening as the refusal to change. No matter our past mistakes, as long as we sincerely repent and turn toward goodness, we can transform our karma and rewrite our destiny. The worst hell is not a place. It is a hardened heart unwilling to change. Repentance is the beginning of awakening, and from there, the light of compassion will guide us toward true liberation. The story. The spider. Once upon a time, there was a monk who practiced diligently, spending many years in deep meditation. One day, while in a state of deep concentration amid complete stillness, he suddenly saw before him an unusually large spider. It spun dense webs and crept ever closer, growing larger with each step until it obscured the entire sky of his mind. Its 8 legs stretched wide, its silk strands forming a cage-like trap, and its eyes gleamed with a strange, threatening light. Though the monk tried to maintain mindfulness, the image of the spider became increasingly vivid. He opened his eyes. Still it was there. He closed them. It grew even clearer. Cold sweat soaked his body. Though he tried contemplating emptiness, that all phenomena are illusions, the spider did not vanish. Shifting to the contemplation of falseness, he intellectually knew it wasn't real, yet the fear persisted. He changed meditation methods, formed mudras, chanted mantras, and prayed to the Buddhas, bodhisattvas, and celestial protectors for help. But the spider remained, stubborn and unmoved, inching ever closer, increasingly menacing. At last, the monk broke off his meditation in panic, his spirit shattered, haunted by the image, mentally and physically exhausted. Unable to endure it, he sought out his master and recounted everything. "Master, I've tried everything, but the spider still won't disappear. I believe there's only one solution: to kill it. In my next session, I will bring a knife. When it appears, I will stab it once and be done with it." The master smiled gently and said, "That's fine, but before you strike, take a piece of white chalk and mark a cross exactly where you intend to stab. Then exit meditation, and we'll decide after. The monk followed his advice and returned to his seat. When the spider appeared again, he took the chalk in trembling hands and drew a cross in the center of its abdomen. After finishing his meditation, he hurried back to his master, determined to destroy the monstrous spider. The master smiled again. "Before you kill it, lift your robe and show me your belly." Surprised but obedient, the monk lifted his robe. To his shock, right in the center of his own belly was the white chalk cross he had drawn on the spider. In that moment, the monk was stunned, then awakened. He was instantly enlightened. Message: the greatest obstacles in spiritual practice do not come from the outside, but from within. The terrifying images, the spiders that appear in meditation, are not real demons, but manifestations of delusion, fear, and ignorance. We think the enemy lies out there, but in truth, it resides within. To destroy it is to destroy ourselves. Enlightenment does not come from eliminating evil, but from recognizing and transforming it. When we turn inward and observe our own mind, we realize there is no spider at all, only the shadow cast by our restless thoughts. And only then can we truly dwell in genuine peace. The story: is gold and silver frightening, or is it the weakness of the human heart? A man once came to a Zen master and respectfully asked, "Master, what is the most frightening thing in this world?" The Zen master paused for a moment, then replied, "Desire." The man frowned, clearly skeptical. The master smiled gently. "If you don't believe me, let me tell you this story. One day, a monk came running out of the forest in a panic. At that very moment, he encountered two of his close friends walking along the edge of the woods. Seeing him so flustered, they asked, "What's the matter? Why are you in such a rush?" The monk, panting, replied, "It's terrifying. I accidentally dug up a pile of gold in the forest." The two men were stunned, then burst out laughing. "Oh, you fool! How is finding gold terrifying? That's a blessing people dream of." Then they eagerly asked, "Where did you find it? Quick, show us." The monk's face turned serious. "Something as vile as that. Aren't you afraid? It can devour a man whole." They waved it off and insisted, "We're not afraid, just show us." Finally, the monk pointed toward the edge of the forest, beneath the ancient tree to the west. The two rushed off and, indeed, discovered the gold buried beneath the soil. Their eyes gleamed with greed as they began plotting how to take it home. One said, "It's too risky to carry it by day. Let's wait until nightfall and move it secretly." He continued, "I'll stay here and guard the gold. You go back and bring us some food. We'll wait till dark." His friend nodded and hurried off. Left alone with the treasure, the one guarding it was soon consumed by greed. He thought, "If only all this gold were mine. If I kill him, I'll be the sole owner." Driven by this thought, he readied a club. By dusk, his friend returned with a simple meal. As soon as the friend turned his back, the guard struck him hard on the head, ending his life. Breathing heavily, he muttered as if to justify himself, "My friend, it was the gold that made me this way." He sat down and ravenously devoured the food his friend had brought. But not long after, his stomach began to burn like fire. Writhing in agony, he screamed. He poisoned the food. In his final moments, he could only gasp. The monk was right. The story ends with two lifeless bodies lying beside a cold heap of gold. Their once close friendship buried under the weight of desire. Message: desire is the root of suffering. Wealth, possessions, fame, and status, these things are not inherently evil. But when greed arises and goes unchecked, it can turn friends into enemies, virtue into vice, and lead people to destruction. Buddhism teaches that good or evil begins in the mind. If we allow unwholesome thoughts to grow, evil actions will soon follow. But if we learn to observe, guard, and purify our hearts, cutting off desire and removing harmful intentions, then life becomes peaceful and clear, like the full moon in a cloudless sky. A practitioner does not fear poverty, only the desires they have not conquered. One who lives in the world but maintains a kind and mindful heart can dwell in true happiness wherever they are. The story: the lesson of change. The small temple nestled quietly on the hillside had long been a place of peace for those seeking the way. There, an elderly abbot lived a life of deep spiritual practice alongside a young novice monk under his guidance. One evening at dusk, a sudden blaze erupted from behind the temple. Fierce flames, driven by wind, devoured the main hall. the altar, and the Buddha statues, generations of devotion reduced to ash. Amid the panic, smoke, and fire, the abbot calmly walked out of the blaze, his face showing no trace of worry. At that moment, a passing traveler, eyes wide at the sight, exclaimed, "My goodness, a temple on fire! Surely this must be karma!" Perhaps someone was offended? The young novice overheard this, his mind in turmoil. He ran to his master and bowed. "Master, why has this disaster befallen our temple? What karma has caused such suffering?" The abbot simply smiled and softly said, "Just wait and see." The novice didn't understand his teacher's words, but out of respect, he remained silent and remembered the phrase, "wait and see." Not long after, something strange happened. Devotees from all around, upon hearing of the temple fire, began offering donations. Some gave effort, others wealth, and soon the temple was rebuilt, grander, more beautiful than before. Worshippers came in crowds. Ceremonies were solemn and vibrant. The novice approached his master and whispered, "Master, is this what you meant when you told me to wait and see?" The abbot, still calmly sitting under a tree, gazed at the newly built temple and gently smiled. Just wait and see. Time passed. 3 years later, the once new temple had aged. Moss covered its walls. The tiles darkened with time. Those who had praised the temple no longer visited. The novice, now more seasoned in monastic conduct, still hadn't forgotten his old question. Once again, he asked his master, "Master, what am I waiting to see?" This time, the abbot did not look at the temple, nor at his disciple. He simply closed his eyes and replied, "You've already seen it. Why keep asking?" The novice fell silent. He looked back over the years. The temple burned. His master remained calm. The temple rebuilt. His master was still calm. Criticized, calm. Praised, still calm. Through all the ups and downs, through creation, endurance, decay, and emptiness, his master never wavered. At that moment, it was as if a bell rang inside him. He suddenly understood. Wait and see wasn't about waiting for events or outcomes. It was about watching his own mind. Was it being pulled by external changes? The world shifts, but does the mind shift with it? All things are impermanent, but is the heart clinging? And the greatest lesson? His master never needed to preach. It was simply how he lived, a life of equanimity. Whether the temple burned or was rebuilt, whether praised or criticized, he was unattached. To live in the world without being swayed by it, that is the virtue of a true monk. Message: life is always changing, like the wind sweeping through a field, sometimes gentle, sometimes fierce. But if our minds are swept along by every wave of rise and fall, joy and sorrow, gain and loss, we will never find peace. Spiritual practice is not about avoiding change, but about not being shaken by it. When our hearts are not entangled in circumstances, whether temples burn or rise, whether we are praised or blamed, we remain anchored. That is true liberation. The story. Where did the flame go? One day, a quiet visitor stepped into an ancient temple nestled beside a bamboo forest. He came with a heavy heart, burdened by sorrow, hoping to find a teaching that could liberate him. Before entering the main hall, he respectfully removed his shoes and bowed before the Buddha. He didn't know which master he might meet today, but his suffering was so great that it no longer mattered. He simply wished to find a path. Inside the hall, there was only an old monk tending to the Buddha's altar. His hand gently poured oil into a small lamp before the statue, the golden light casting a glow upon his wrinkled but serene face. The visitor approached and bowed. "Master, I am in great pain. I came today hoping to hear the Dharma to ease my suffering. All I know is that life is filled with so much pain, but I do not know how to escape it." The old monk said nothing. He quietly cupped his hand over the small flame in front of him. The flame immediately went out. Then he turned back and smiled, asking, "Before I extinguished the flame, was it still there?" The visitor was puzzled. "Yes, master, it was still there. Now the lamp is out. Where did the flame go?" The visitor hesitated. It's gone, meaning it no longer exists. But where it went, I don't know." The old monk looked at him sternly. "Your hair is gray. You've lived through many years, yet you still cannot answer such a simple question. Then how do you hope to attain liberation? I ask again, the flame has gone out. Where did it go?" The visitor bowed his head. "Please teach me, master." The monk smiled, his voice slow and profound. "If you want to know where the flame went, ask yourself first, where did it come from?" Stunned by the answer, the visitor stood speechless. not because the words were too lofty, but because they were simple and carried deep truth. The old monk continued, "The entirety of the Buddha's teaching over 45 years can be summed up in that answer. All phenomena arise from causes and conditions. When the conditions are present, oil, wick, and fire, the flame appears. When even one condition is gone, the flame vanishes. No one takes the flame away. It arises through convergence and disappears when those conditions dissolve." What we call death or liberation is the same. When a practitioner realizes the path and the body perishes, we don't need to ask where do they go, but rather look deeper. Where did they come from? When you understand birth and death through dependent origination, fear and confusion dissolve. Message: like a flame, life arises from conditions. Our existence is not fixed or eternal, but a flow formed by converging factors. When conditions are sufficient, we are born. When they disperse, we pass away. No one brings us here, and no one takes us away. Liberation is not a destination, but a deep understanding of dependent origination. When we truly see the nature of the flames arising and ceasing, we also begin to understand ourselves and step onto the path of true peace. The story: Spying on the Mind. Long ago, in a small temple nestled halfway up a mountain, there lived a young man who had been ordained as a monk for 2 years. Though he diligently chanted sutras, did temple chores, and upheld the precepts, he still felt empty and heavy-hearted inside. One early morning, he knelt before his master, voice choked with emotion. "Master, I beg your permission to return to lay life. This path of cultivation is too difficult for me. Every day I battle with myself. My mind is as restless as a monkey. My thoughts gallop like wild horses. It's exhausting. I truly can't go on." The master looked at his disciple with compassionate eyes, then gently asked, "Before coming to the temple, what did you do for a living?" The young man bowed his head, speaking meekly. "Master, I used to be a thief. I knew it was wrong, so I resolved to become a monk and atone for my sins." The master smiled kindly. "Then becoming a monk was the right choice. Very fitting for you." The young man was surprised. "Huh? What do you mean, master? I don't understand." The master nodded and explained. "When you were stealing, how did you go about it?" "Well, before making a move, I had to spy very carefully. I'd observe where people hid their money and wait until they were sound asleep before acting. Any slip-up could be dangerous, so I always maintained intense focus." The master gently patted his disciple's shoulder. "Excellent. Practicing the way requires just the same. You must spy on your own mind each day. Watch for what arises: anger, jealousy, greed, deceit. Spot them and stop them. Your mind is the house. If you don't observe it closely, the thieves of affliction will sneak in and steal your peace. Spying on your mind, without relaxing or neglecting it, day after day, that is true cultivation. Not merely chanting, sweeping the temple, or wearing robes." The young man was silent for a long time, then suddenly bowed deeply to the ground. "Master, I understand now. I will continue on the path." Message: spiritual practice is not some lofty matter. It is the process of observing and mastering one's inner world. Just as a thief must spy carefully to succeed, a practitioner must constantly spy on the mind. Watch what it desires, where it leans. The mind is like a wild horse. If left unchecked, it will lead us to the abyss. But if we observe and tame it little by little, we'll gradually walk the path to peace. Practice lies not in form, but in awakening, moment by moment. The story: The Wooden Statue and the Clay Statue. In a riverside village known for its skillful craftsmen, 2 statues stood side by side in a small temple, one carved from precious wood, the other molded from carefully fired clay. They stood together under the temple roof, listened to the echoing chimes, and welcomed the morning breeze and golden sunset each day. One day, dire news arrived. Storms were coming, and floods might submerge the entire region. Villagers hurried to reinforce their homes and evacuate their belongings. Amid the chaos outside, inside the small temple, the wooden statue spoke. "The water is rising. I'm made of wood, so I can float on the surface and drift away without losing my life. But I pity you. You're made of clay, and when the water seeps in, you'll surely dissolve. Aren't you afraid?" The clay statue remained still, yet its voice was calm and gentle, like an autumn breeze. "You may float away, and I may dissolve. But I am clay. Returning to the earth is nothing to fear. I'm not worried for myself, but for you. When the water rises and carries you off, where will you go? Though you won't dissolve, can you keep your form? Will you find shelter or drift endlessly, wearing away in uncertainty? The wooden statue fell silent. Then the flood came. The waters engulfed the land, sweeping away homes, trees, and even the little temple. As foretold, the wooden statue floated with the current, not submerged. But it was tossed about by waves, battered by rapids and rocks, scratched and broken piece by piece. The clay statue, on the other hand, gradually dissolved into the water, returning to Mother Earth, merging with the soil without burden or fear. Message: in life, when storms arrive, instead of panicking or clinging tightly, sometimes the wisest choice is to let go and accept. Some natures cannot be changed, just as clay will dissolve in water, but it is serenity and understanding that grant us true strength. Not all that floats is strong, and not all that dissolves is weak. Those who live in harmony with nature and return to their roots in peace are never truly lost. The story: Retaliation of the Beggar. That afternoon, under the golden rays of sunset bathing the old temple roof, a thin beggar, hair disheveled, quietly sat beneath the veranda of the main hall. In front of him was the meager meal he had begged for that day: a few lumps of cold rice, some salt, and a wooden perch fish. The wooden fish had been meticulously carved and painted to resemble a real cooked fish. It lay neatly atop a banana leaf, as if the old man considered it the most precious dish. The temple caretaker, a man with some knowledge but harboring inner arrogance, walked by and sneered. With a mocking tone, he remarked, "Hey, old man, what do you plan to do with that wooden fish? In the end, it's just rice and salt." The beggar showed no anger. He looked up, eyes deep and serene, and pointed toward the stone Buddha statue seated on a lotus in the main hall. "And you, what do you do with that stone Buddha? Or is it, in the end, just ignorance and desire?" That simple question struck like a blade into the caretaker's heart. His face froze, speechless. That small encounter, seemingly just an exchange between two people, carried a profound truth. For throughout the ages, many religions have bound their followers in elaborate rituals and sacrificial offerings, making them believe that devotion and worship alone could bring salvation. But the Buddha was different. He boldly called such practices dogmatic attachment and superstitious formalism. He taught that only by living in accordance with the Dharma could one truly make offerings and pay noble homage to the Tathagata. He once told the story of a monk whose only wish each day was to behold the 32 auspicious marks of the Buddha. This disciple believed that walking beside the Buddha, holding the hem of his robe, stepping in his footprints meant closeness to enlightenment. But the Buddha gently rebuked, "Even if you walk close to me, touching my robe, if you do not live by the Dharma, you are still far from me. Closeness is not in form, but in heart and way of life." One who only kneels before a stone statue to pray, without cultivating body and mind, will forever be unable to taste the flavor of liberation. Rituals, chanting, offerings, all are merely tools. For beginners, they are like boats crossing the river of delusion, bridges for first steps. But at some point, one must leave the boat, step onto the shore of enlightenment, and live truly by the Dharma, or else remain forever like the beggar with the wooden fish, all form, no substance. Message: reverence lies not in outward rituals, but in living truthfully by the path. The Buddha does not need our incense, prostrations, or offerings. He needs our practice, our kindness, our renunciation of evil, our wakefulness amidst life. Images are only external symbols. Without mindfulness, we fall into the trap of ceremony and forget the essence, which is inner transformation. To follow the path is not to carve a fish from wood to admire, but to live so that we understand who we are and what we must do to be worthy of the path we follow.